Hi guys, Kutemwa here, and whether you're new here or you've been here before, welcome to part 3 of the graduate school search. So part 1 was an inner reflection. We were seeing what do we need in a PhD or graduate school program and quantifying that. Part 2 was us looking into each school, as many schools as we can, looking at those criteria. So whether you decided to use my spreadsheet or not, I think it's really important to look into as many schools as you can, and it's more helpful, or it's easier when you're looking for specific things instead of just like scrolling through the website, And so if you haven't seen those past 2 videos, I encourage you to go back and see them, because this video is for people who are informed, who have decided they know what they need in a program and have looked into schools, as many schools as they can. So if you're still in that process, keep looking. So this is going to be after you are satisfied, you've looked into many schools and now you want to decide which schools that you want to apply to. And congratulations for reaching this stage, because it takes a lot just to be here. So I applaud you and I'm very happy for you, and let's do this. So this video has 2 parts. The first part is we're going to see which schools actually are worth our application and then we're going to now pick from those schools which ones we're actually going to apply to. So this is going to be what I used. You might tweak it, based on your preferences and things like that, but this is just meant to be a guide, for you to see how maybe other people did it. And so the first thing is we're going to classify each school as a yes or a no or a maybe. And this involves 2 things. So the first thing is we have to know, of course, what makes it a yes or a no or a maybe. And so the first thing that makes it a no is we're going to come up with our non-negotiables. So there are going to be things that are just like things that you just don't even want to deal with that should make a school a no. And then there's going to be schools that have what you need, of course. Those are going to be yeses. And then maybe there's something that's not as ideal, but you would be able to, handle it. Those would be the maybes. And so I'll share with you what made a school yeses or nos or maybes. So what made a school a no, the biggest thing was the research. A PhD program is literally research. And I don't want to go to a school that only has 1 professor or no professors doing research in the field that I want to do, because I have to join a professor's lab. There's no other way, And so that's the first thing that made a school a no. If they only had, or if they didn't have sufficient research, or sufficient professors doing research in that field. And then the second thing that made a school a no was the funding. So there's going to be some schools that maybe cover some cost of living, but not others. And then there are some where they give you a stipend, but then there are certain fees that you still have to pay. So for me, that's not something that I wanted to deal with. So those were also automatic no's. And then the other thing is some of the application requirements. So I found a few schools which would still require me to take the TOEFL, which is an English proficiency exam. And most schools will waive it if you've been at an English-speaking institution for 4 years. But there are some schools that were just like, no, you need to take it. And I did not want to deal with that, so that was an automatic no. And so that's the first thing I did was I went through my list of schools. I had quite a number at this point. I went through my list of schools, and at the bottom, I wrote down those negatives. So those are things that I just can't. So I wrote those things at the bottom, and I used those to now look at the did you make the cut column, and then I would put the yes or the no. I would put the no's first. So those are the no's, those that, those 3 things I mentioned, those were automatic no's. And then the thing that would make schools maybes is the research as well. So the research was the biggest thing for me, right? So if there's only 2 professors doing research, it's not as ideal, because maybe something happens and they can't take me, I would feel safer if I had 3 options. So for those that only had two people doing research, I put those as maybes. So I went through the list again, put my list as maybes. And then the next thing the yeses are those that have what I need. So they have the professors, fees are paid and things like that. The other things on my list, like I had shared my list with you in my second video and my first as well, but other things like the size of the research groups and things like that, those are things that I would be able to deal with, So for now, I just put them as yeses or no's or maybes based on my non-negotiables. And then the next part is where we can now get very not picky, we can get very detailed, right? Okay, so now we've classified schools as yeses or no's or maybes. So the next part is now I collected. So those that were automatic no's are now off my list. I'm not looking at them anymore. So now I made a separate table, which is at the bottom, which it says personal ranking, right? So what I did was I just gathered all the schools that were yeses and wrote them down there. And then there were schools that were like convincing maybes. Convincing maybes were also added to that list. But basically, which schools do I now want to look at in detail? And I don't know how it's going to be for you. For me, I had quite a good number. that did have, quite a number of yeses and maybes. So now we're going to be balanced, because graduate school applications are not guaranteed at all. It's I will share my experience in later videos, but there are schools that I thought would be, I'll get into that school, and I didn't get accepted. So it's not a guarantee that you will get into any school, no matter how small, no matter how big, because at that level, like, it's just so, like, they have to look at research, they have to look at your experience, and then there are so many people applying. So it's not like undergrad, where it's more like, oh, if you have this high GPA. It is not like that at all. So the biggest thing is we need to be as balanced as we can to be able to create room for ourselves, and even in that, there's still no guarantee. So the best thing you can do is just prepare as much as you can. So we're going to classify schools. I don't know if you've heard of this before, you probably have, but we're going to classify our schools as reach schools, target schools, and safety schools. And this is really, really important. So how people classify differs very much. I spent a lot of time doing, trying to see like what would actually be an accurate way of classifying schools, in that way. So what I used was the acceptance rates, and I was able to find websites that shared, the acceptance rate for the previous class. So for specifically chemistry PhD programs, other times I'd have to do just in general the graduate school if they didn't have that. But if they did, I was seeing the percentage of people. So how easy it is to get in is based on how many people apply and how many people that they can actually take, right? So I collected all the acceptance rates of the schools, right? Whatever percentage of the class was accepted, and that's what I used to classify the schools as my laptop. Anyway, that's what I used to classify the schools as, either reach, target, or safety. So I left my little like mark there. Like I said, you have to do this on your own. It's really based on your preference, right? So for me, I said a reach school is going to be a school that has an acceptance rate that is less than 25%, which is small. Then a target school is going to be a school that has acceptance rates of between 25 and 45. Safety school is above 45. So essentially about more than half who apply get accepted into the program. And so based on that now, I then classified my schools as, reach, target, and safety. And that's really important because that's now what I'm going to use to decide the schools that I'm going to apply to. So now, after we've looked at schools, we know how many meet our criteria, and we know, where they are. Like I said before, nothing is guaranteed, but you don't want to apply to all rich schools, because it's at that point it's just a probability situation, because there are people with great grades, great essays, great recommendations, but they still get rejected just because of how picky, and they have to really comb through your application with a fine-tooth comb. It is not guaranteed at all. Even target schools, whether they have a good acceptance rate, it's just not guaranteed. So it's really important to have safety schools as well, which are also not guaranteed. The point is that it's not guaranteed, so really do your best, and we'll get into future parts of the application on this channel as we go on. But at this point, we're just trying to see which schools are we applying to. So now the next thing is we're going to decide how many schools are we going to apply to. I wish I could tell you the formula and everything that's involved. There's nothing like that. So this is really going to be personal, based on you as a person. You have to decide. Like I said, this process is really involving. So you have to sit down with yourself and say like, I'll apply to 6, 8, 9, 10, based on how you feel, how confident you feel, and also the application fees. There's just so many things that are involved. Also, there are waivers. I will get into that in future videos. But yes, the point is that you have to sit down with yourself and decide how many schools you want to apply to. You can talk to people, get their opinions, but trust me, you will get so many different opinions, it won't even matter in the end. I applied to 10 schools, and that was just I just decided, I just picked a number, and I thought I would be comfortable with that range of schools. I picked 9, then I added 1. Long story, but yes, so I picked 3 of each, right? So initially I had 3 reach schools, 3 target schools, and 3 safety schools, and then later on I added another target school. Long story, but yes, so now that you've classified your list and you've come up with the number of schools that you want to apply to, then now you have to get picky, right? So imagine out of your list of yeses, like 7 of them are safety, like 8 are target. It depends on you and your what you need and the schools that you are looking into. So then you have to pick out of those which ones are better. So this is where your research comes into play. So we said in the checklist there are things that are not necessarily non-negotiables. Like things like the size of the research group, is it a healthy environment in general from what you can see, things like that. So then we can become picky, right? So out of your target schools, out of my schools, I picked the top 3, based on the things that I did my research on. So I picked my top 3, rich schools, my top 3 target schools, my top 3 safety schools, and that was how I decided the schools that I was going to apply to. And then what comes next is next and later. But it's really important to make a well-informed decision. I had shared in the second video when we were looking at schools individually that there are so many schools that I did not even think would make the list, and there are so many schools that like I thought yes for sure, and then I found there's only one professor doing research. So it's really important that you make a well-informed decision. I felt very happy because I knew out of all the schools that I applied to, like literally all of them, I would be fine. Like all of them had what I needed. So then it gets rid of the stress of, oh my goodness, I need that one school. It's like now I can spread out my efforts to each school, take the time, look into them, and get excited because now I know the schools that could possibly be my home for the next like 5-6 years. So yes, this will continue, the series will continue. I'll be talking about different parts of the graduate school application. We'll go into the essays, fee waivers, I'll read my essays as well. But please let me know in the comments if there's something else that you would want me to make a video about. I'll be very happy to. And I wish you all the very, very best in your graduate school seeking journey. It's a lot, I know, especially if you're a current student and you're still balancing classes and everything. But trust me, it will be worth it. And you starting this early is great because then you can, get the heavy lifting out of the way. And yeah, all the best. I am rooting for you and I'll see you in the next video.